So team, welcome back. Day 4 for our Selenium automation training with Java. We'll kind of continue with our code and where we left with the project 1. Try and get it to a good summary. I'm going to open up our workspace quickly and see if any questions from anyone. Shravanti, your hand is raised. I don't know if you had a question, so let me know, please. If there are questions, you can raise your hand, team, or put it in the chat. So team, what we are doing with the training is very simple. We're building the basic level frameworks to begin with. What we are doing is a extremely simple one so far, but we're going to add to it overall today. So what we were doing is on mortgage calculator, if you remember, we took a simple bunch of few sets of test data and went about changing that information in our application and seeing how things can be done. Now, what is it that we had planned, or the structure in which we had planned to do things, team? Where am I maintaining the Google Sheet? Is it still here? All right. So I have my test data here, or rather test cases, and a couple of tests with different changing sets of data, right? And we're seeing what we expect for them so they pass or fail accordingly. So I might have hundreds of tests like this, team. So how do I test all of them? They may be very similar in terms of what they do, but only the data could be changing. But still, they become unique tests for us because each one will tell us under what circumstances something might be failing. Are you all with me, team? Focusing? Very important discussions are going to come. So I need to be able to repeat. These tests for varied sets of changing information. So within our programming language, how is it that we can repeat this process, team? So to do this, we will have to use, and no problem, Shanti, thank you. Get into the understanding the for loop. One of the basic commands that we've seen within our programming so far is an if statement, where it compares to see if two values are same, then do something else, do something else. Now let's talk about a for loop and what it does, teams. I'm going to open up a new Java class and just call this as for loop 1. Okay, we have a main to it. And let's talk about what happens, team. So let us say I just want to print numbers of I from 1 to 100. So how would I do that, team? I'll say I equals 1, then print this and say value of, has to start with double quotes, of I is, and then plus I, whatever is the value for it. So I need to do this repeated number of times, team. So if I just have to print it one time, there's nothing much that I'm worried about. But if I have to change this over and over 100 times, it is gonna be absolutely challenging for me. And still doable manually. This is how things were working way back, where we had to keep doing things like this manually. And it works. It's not that it does not work, but the fact being, let us say if I want to even change value of the variable I is, so even to mention this, I have to go and change this in so many places because it is the same code that is repeating. Why should we go about doing this process? And hence we implement a for loop, team. So instead of going through all these complexities, if I just say for, I've already used I cannot define a variable with the same name. I'll define something with J. And everything about definition increment will be in this. So understand the structure right now, team. Int J equals 1, semicolon, J is less than 101, I will say. We want to print till 100. J equals J plus 1. Now, what is it that we are doing here, team? Each time I'm incrementing here. So instead of writing number 2, I could always have written I plus 1. It'll take the old value and it'll put it each time. So let's just execute this code as is without that for loop right now. So how do we do bulk comment, team? Multiple lines, slash, star, and then followed by star slash. All right, so that's how you're commenting the entire thing here. Okay, now when we execute this, let's see what comes out, team, for us. Value of variable I is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's kind of doing what we wanted, and each time we're incrementing I, team, but repeated set of code. Now the same thing we are doing it in this process called for loop. The for loop has 3 portions to it, team. The first one is defining the counter and the starting point. Where does my count start from? So I'm saying that J is going to start from 1. And then I'm giving the next one is this is a condition, team. Under what condition should we execute what is there in these brackets, curl brackets? And how many steps at a time, or how you're incrementing that counter. That is the other value that we have to give. Now, if I erase these and try and put this information below and say that sys value of J is plus J, you would now notice, team, the same print shouldn't take too long, will print out all the variables till 100. So we are able to loop through specific sets of lines as we want, how we want. And this ability we are able to easily achieve with a for loop. Now, the simplest thing about a for loop is to understand how we navigate through, team. Now, for example, if we create another for loop, and here, now see how we'll do it, team. For int, for example, I can say k equals 0, all right? K is less than 50. Oh, where is k is semicolon? K is less than 50. That's my condition. K is 0 is the starting point. K plus plus. Now, what this k plus plus is doing, team, is nothing but, let us say if I have a variable called int x and x has 10. Okay. Now, if I say x plus plus is nothing but to say exactly like x equals to x plus 1. So incrementing a number by 1, a shorter way to do it is done using just saying that value and plus plus. Now, how can we test this, team? Say I used a lowercase here and uppercase here. That's why it's giving an error. So let's put a print statement and say k is. Now, how many will it print, team, everyone? How many rows will it print? Team? 51 rows, 50 rows, 50 rows from 0 to 49. Good answer, baby. So counter is starting from 0. It will go until, will it reach 50? No, it will reach till 49. That's the last true condition. Then we are stop to increment anymore. So saying k plus plus or k equals k plus 1 is the same thing, team, just a shortcut. So if you see that next time, don't get confused about it. Now this is a value that is going in and it's going to print us 50 times. How do you keep an eye on the value of x, team, while we're doing this? How do you get the value of X? There's no print statement, right? That is printing X value. How do we get it then? How can we get the value of X as it is not there in the print statement? So print statement, if you add yes, you can get it. If you say k equals x, yeah, that's fine too. You can say k equals or x equals to k here, and then you can do it. But without changing the code, you basically have to go into the debug mode team and put a breakpoint on, let's say, the line that you're interested in and run it in the debug mode. Do you see this debug icon? And once it hits the breakpoint, it'll tell you what is the value of x. At this point in my program, there's only one variable. That value is 10. Okay, do you see this? Let me take the mouse over. X is 10. So as soon as I do step into which goes to the next step, my X value has changed to 11. And out here, when you go team in your debug mode, this is where you can observe values of what is happening within your test as well. And look at this print statement. See, it's gone to line 9. It's come back to line 8. Line 9, come back to line 8. And look at the value of K on the right side, each time getting incremented. And it will continue to do that all the way till it reaches number 49. Okay, so that's a simple if first statement for loop team. Now let's try and put this back into our application and see how we can apply it. But for me team, I'll show you how the code will quickly start getting dirty and what we can do to improve it. We're going to start learning about how to write our methods. Ting, 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 ting. See how big it is already, 50 lines. Luckily, it is not too odd because there's some English. It is easy to understand. Before I mess this up, save this as a new version, MC04. And now let's introduce a few things. So all these red errors that you're getting are syntax errors. You want to solve them before you can save or execute them, team. Now, team, if I want to run these things for different sets of value, let us add one more application value, team, that I'll call as interest rate. I think that'll help us. Yeah. See this interest rate? I'm going to add this field to our program. So this is going to be number ting 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 after home value before we click on calculate after down payment. So out here, I'm adding a new step. Since I don't have 6 is already used here, I'll say this is 5.1 or this is 5.1 and this is 2. Enter interest rate. I will tell you my intent of why I use this team in a short way. But how do we add a new line or statement? We first go to the driver, find an element by using whatever methodology we can and perform the action. Now, what is the element? How do we find it? Right click, inspect. Observe to see if there's anything that is unique in ID or name that you can take. See, I see name parameter interest rate or ID is interest rate here. So you can take either taking the ID and putting it up here. How do you know that this will work, team? Are you confident? Are you sure that this may work? Never can you be sure about it. So what do you do then? You test it by executing or debugging it. That's when we will know. Okay. And this I'm saying I rate, interest rate. So the way I've named it is first name, lowercase, and then the second name with uppercase for the first character. Little camel case type, but we'll talk about that later, team. So interest rate, I want to, let us say, put 1, okay, and execute this. What would happen? So here my down payment is there. Then for interest rate here, I'm changing it to I rate, okay. And we're going to run the same process. We're going to see what's happened. I'm not going to, let me close the browser. That is fine too. All I'm achieving, team, is trying to see what is coming as one value. And I'm going to download this as an Excel sheet so I can start making some quicker changes. Okay, great. So I have this. Okay, so here's the Excel team. There is a 5.1, right, that has come. So I'm going to introduce that. Insert, copied cell. So this is 5.1, 5.2. It is not mandatory team that you have to write this way, but just that it is easy. Okay, it's not matching exactly with those numbers there, team. So please ignore that. But we are entering interest rate here. So the first time I'm going to enter 1%. That is my intent. And I want to see what value I got. Expecting actual is 846.20. Okay, so that's my actual value, $846.20. Actually, team, make sure you put a dollar sign here. That's fine. 846 point, not fine as of now, but we'll come to it. Now, what about if it is 2 and run it again? So for me, all these test cases right now not very relevant. I'll just delete them. I'll just copy this with the changed format. Little change of color so I can see it clearly. And let me make sure if everything else is the same. 425, 250,000. Those are the values, team. 250,000. Make sure your test data is correctly keyed in. And what you'll continue to identify, team, or relate with is a lot of challenges that will come your way where you don't know where the issue is. Right now, your test data or whatever content you're writing is there in Excel. You have your entire Selenium and Java that you're writing in Eclipse, and you have your application under test. So our intent is to test and see if anything wrong with the application. That's the intent, correct? Ultimate idea. So we want to be able to point and say where it's going wrong. But before we get there, we cannot confirm that, team, unless you rule out that there's nothing wrong with the data or with Selenium and Java. Give me 1 second. Team, I need to make a quick call. 10 seconds, please. Sorry, I'm back. All right. So, team, what I'm trying to mention is the fact that as you go about identifying where it is, your first question should be, is my data everything correct? The second, did I write the correct coding? Is my framework exact? Then you can talk about the application as, okay, looks like everything else is set. Let's look at the application if there's a problem there. Okay. So with 1, we got this. With 2, okay, 250,000. Let me enter the same here. And with 2% as the interest rate, what is it that we got? 930.17. And if I change this to 3 and run this again while I work on this, okay. And I have one more test case like that to add. Let us say this is 2. 3. This sheet will become important team for us, so I just want to make sure that it is there correctly. What am I doing here? Okay. Now, what's the result that we got for 3? Actual EMI is this. And see how I'm not even worried about looking at the application. I'm letting an automation tool do it for me. So for 3, the actual EMI is this value, 1021.14. Okay. Now, and this can continue to go on, team, for different sets, right? And for 4, if this is the last one, assuming for now, I'm expecting this to be, or just drag it. Sorry, it's spending a little time on these small aspects, team. And there we go, another number. So let's erase these drawings. And now here is my preparation of what I want to test, team. So 4 different sets, each one, as we do changes, we are expecting it to give us different results. But what is unfortunate is I'm having to go and change this each time myself. How can I make it into a loop so it does it automatically, team? Very simple. First, I'll start a loop and I'll say for int, let's assume I, which starts as a counter with 1, and let us say we want to do up to 4 rows is less than 5, and I equals, sorry, semicolon, I equals I plus 1 or I plus plus as an incrementer. Now within this, I need to repeat all of these steps, team. Okay, within that for loop. So I took that entire thing and put it inside here. And now as I keep it inside here, you will notice that I'm also using indentation, team, like tabs. In Java, it is not mandatory, but it is an absolute critical thing from a view perspective. So as soon as I know it's a tab, I will assume that it is under a block of code. So same thing, if you look at it here in the if statement, we've used tabs. Otherwise, we could have always written like this. It won't discourage you, but it is not a good practice. So always you use indents, team. That tells us that, okay, we've moved to another portion of the code. All right. Now, what is happening, team? This is so only when the value is 4 will it hit this information, correct? Oh, I don't need so much stuff. So this should be correct. But now, why should I repeat it 4 times, 5 times for the same thing, team? Let's try at least 3 times and see if it can do, and will it pass all the 3 times. So now what should happen? I'm expecting the application to open up, go through that process, do everything and come out with the value once. Now it's going in the second time. So that's the test passed the first time and it's clicked, it's passed the second time, and it'll pass the third time because there's nothing changing in it, team. It is not like a totally irrelevant test. Sometimes you just want to put some nightly test like this and keep on running on the application to make sure everything is working fine. But at the same time, you want something to change in it. So what is it that we want to change? Maybe at least interest rate should be easy to change. How can I change it? So I'll say each time interest rate equals whatever I'm getting from the value I, team. Okay. Now I is an integer. It starts from 1, then it goes to 2, 3. I'll put it till 5 now in this case. So what should happen, team? Can you all imagine? This will be 1, then 2, then 3, and then 4. So out of the 4 tests, how many tests will it pass now when we give this? And expected EMI will not change. Out of the 4, how many tests will pass, team? How many conditions out of this 4 will pass? Because we are expecting this value for all. You're right, only one time. It's only going to be happening once. That is what we're expecting to see. Now, what do we have on line 16? That seems to be an syntax error. So let's take our mouse over and try and understand, team. So basically, it's very simple, team. When you have data as variables in your program, you've seen that I is an integer here, and irate is a string. You cannot directly take these values and put it into each other, team. You will need to make certain changes to it. How do we make these changes? And that is where I want you to constantly look at Google as an assistant. Say Java string to integer int. Just search for a quick solution, team. Look at Stack Overflow, pretty much very reliable with the Q&A that happens there. I'm sorry. So here I see a quick solution where it's a very simple one. It says integer.parseInt in my string. So even if your string has a number like this, then you use the integer.parseInt my string, and it will return the integer value of it. So basically, it's going to lose the double quotes and it's going to become a different data type. So let's write the same out here, team. So what am I saying now? Integer dot parse int, and into here we pass that integer. One second, the other way. This is actually going to take a string as an input and send us back an integer. We want integer to string. So our Google search was incorrect. Java int to string conversion. So all for that you're going to do is integer dot to string instead of to parseInt. So integer dot to string as a command, and we're using the value of I. So each time I want to take the value of I and put it in here as a new one and let it execute. So now I'm going to sit back and let this execute 5 times. And I'm not going to watch the application, team, but I'm just going to watch this flow here. So that failed. Sure. Next one. That failed as well. That's expected. Yes. Only the last one, I believe, should pass then, correct? Did that fail? Yes, that failed too. I'm looking at these arrows here to know. And there you go, that passed for us, team, and we're good. So now what we have done is we are able to at least repeat and try and see how my application is behaving when my data changes. Okay, it's one of the simplest approaches to it. But what we are looking at is something called as hard coding here, team. I am hard coding it because all my values are here as expected. Each time if I have to go and change here, it is a laborious work. And that is where in next session, we'll talk about how we read and write from an Excel sheet directly. So I don't have to then maintain my data independently here. But till then, let us talk briefly about making this code looking a little better, team. I don't like the way it looks. It's good the way it works, but it's pretty long, almost like a flow. I don't know where is what and so on. Can we make things a little bit more easier to understand? And what we do is the concept of methods, team. So let's save this as 5. That way we can write some Java functions, Java methods. So the way to do it is very simple. Let's talk about it in generic first. And team, I call them as functions or methods interchangeable. So I'll just leave them as functions right now. What is the purpose and what do they do? These functions, team. So whenever I have an activity, right, I could be having a need to repeat it. For example, print statements itself. If I want to print something, but before that I want to print like this and say start. Okay, and then I have one more like this, and I have an end, and this is the start. Okay, and here I'm doing some process. Okay, and do nothing. But these three steps is one flow for me. And if I want to repeat this multiple times, what is my option, team? I have no option except for copying this, pasting it, and repeating it multiple times. And this becomes very tough to work with. And one of the primary reasons is if I have to change at one point, I have to go and change it everywhere. And that includes effort, that includes risk of adding more defects to what we're doing. So how can then we get more organized? What we do at that point, team, is this. If you see your main method here, this is called as the main method, and it is minimizable, this whole block of code. After this block, so this close bracket is related to the open bracket on line 4. Look at that highlight there. So after this block, I'm going to create another simple function, and I have to call it public static void my function A. Okay. Now this function does nothing but this. And now I can replace this all this humongous looking code with just a call to this function and say, you know what, go do this. That's it. And it will keep on repeating it how many ever times you want. If you want, you can also put it into a for loop, say for int I equals 0, I less than 10, I plus plus. Okay. And here I can call the same function instead of calling it manually here multiple times. So now this is a sprint statements, team, so should not affect. What happened here? Why is there an error? Okay, sorry. And let's execute this. So a lot of print statements have come out because we are repeating the same. And for me, if I have to change this at any given time, I change it in one place. Wherever it is called, it gets reflected. So this is one type of a function, team, where you're just calling it and it will do a bunch of activities. You can write whatever you want within here what it should do. Now, there could be another type of a function where you do something, get squared, let's say, as a simple function. And what I want this function to do, or this method to do, team, let's call this. So get squared each time should take a number, let us say integer x is there, and it should multiply it with itself. So x star x, and print that value. Say the square of, if I say x, then I say plus x, plus is plus, oh no, sorry, sorry. So x is as is, and then I'm going to put a y out here. So primarily we didn't initialize, there's no value to it, and that's the problem. Now for this function, the get squared, whenever I want to call it, I want it to do the squaring of a specific number, and that number I will pass as an input argument, team. So let us say I want to get the square of 10, so that I want to be able to send here. So if you're sending, when you're calling a function, you also have to capture it when you want to execute. So I'll say int whatever x may be. So here I don't have to redefine x as an integer. I just have a new integer y. It will multiply x y with each other and print this up. Now let's run this and see, team. And if I do the same with 11, 12, 13. So you can create different outputs, team, the way that is suitable for us. The big advantage is that whenever we want to change, we change it in one place. Your maintenance is easy, and you can call it as and when from any of these sections, team. Now, the same concept, let us try and think why we should apply it in this mortgage calculator. First and foremost thing, team, I want things to look easy. This is like too many sets of code. It'll keep going, going, going. Can I break it down into something like this? Public, static, void, start app, MC app. That's the first one, let us assume. Then I want to create one more like this and call this as input test data. Okay, where we're inputting all of them. And then one more I'm going to create, and I'm going to call this as compare results. What happened to it? So 3 test team. Now what I will do very blindly as of now, cut off these, what I have to till navigate, do a control X and take it and put it here. And just call this as start MC app. Oops, there's no inputs to it. So it'll just call it as is. The second one, cut all this till calculate. And let's put it up here. And I'll say input test data is here. But to input test data, team, if you notice, it is saying, I don't know where your H value is, down payment is, interest rate is, it does not know. Why? Because they are created here in main and they cannot be accessed there. We'll talk about life of variables little later, team. But the fact that I need to find a solution to this. So one solution is I can pass all these 3 variables. For now, I'll just call this as V1, V2, V3 team. All right. And here I'll just call this a string H value goes to V1, string dpay. And if you don't want to confuse it with a function, it's a function variable, just give it any other name you want, team, that is convenient for you to recognize. And just an introduction to functions, we're going to continue to use this very strongly on all classes going forward. So don't be too worried, team. Okay, so this is one type, second type of the function that we saw. Even MyD I don't have. So actually, you know what, WebDriver MyD, at least I'll take it out of here and put it WebDriver MyD as a global level. There's still a lot to do. So V1, V2, V3 is basically your H value is going here. Your down payment is going here. Interest rate is going here. So that's your third one. Now, second method. So the last one is going to be my, oops, there's a closed browser also. Compare results, okay? MyD, I should make it static. expected EMI. I'll send this expected EMI. So string f underscore, whatever this value is, I'll put here, that will come here. And the same thing we will use to compare. And this will tell me if the test passed or not. So compare results is the third one. And into this, now I'm going to enter, what am I calling? Expected EMI. See how my test is now? It is the same exact test team, but just the fact that sorry team, it has slowly got much more simpler to look at and making easier presentation for us too. So end of it, this is my code team, that's it. So it's starting the MC application, and for this I could also pass the URLs and so on as inputs as to where that application is. If not, all the steps are there in here. Then it is going to the next one called input test data and compare results. All these are user-defined functions team or methods that we have created. If you look at Selenium has its own, like when it says manage or window or to is a method within Selenium WebDrivers navigate, and where you pass this parameter and it will take you to that. So anywhere you see brackets and we're passing something, that means that is a method into which we are sending something and it will do something for us. And each of these methods now are created by us as a user, and they're built-ins that are already existing, so you can't put the same name for your methods. Tomorrow team will review this once again. I'm going to go through that Excel sheet and find ways of how we can maybe take inputs right from here and execute it there. And that way we can be able to understand how the data-driven framework as an approach works. What you're seeing is called as a linear regression, at least MC04. If you go back to before the functions came in, it just goes one step after the other and tries to execute it just in a linear fashion, nothing complex about it. Then comes something called as a functional regression testing or functional regression framework, where we are breaking down our application into functionalities. Each one can be a function. We call them very simple. Now we will talk a little bit about data-driven framework, then keyword, and then the POM PF with CI/CD. Um, that's it from my side for today, team. Need to rush out to pick up my kid. Any questions that I can handle, please? How is the practice coming along for you all on what we're doing with our trainings? Any practice do you suggest today? Oh, wow. Mm, not today, because see, I think what is important today is to try and write functions, team. Just write for loop and function. So as the live trainings are going, my only strongest recommendation is try and repeat whatever we're doing to the largest extent you can. So you're going with the same flow. That's best as of now. There's a lot to do, but that's good enough. Great. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll see you back tomorrow. And team, for non-members, please note there will be cancellations happening by Chandana or Pavan today. So please keep that in check. If you remember, if you get a cancellation, please register again, send us an email, and I will approve it. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Good night. We'll see you back tomorrow, same time. Bye all. Bye all.